Welcome to Spotlight on Natural Resources. I'm Bill Waisner. With me is Jay Solomon. Welcome, Jay.
Good afternoon.
So, we're going to talk today about invasive species or exotic invasive species. And as we talk about that subject, I think it would be useful for our listeners to know what exactly an exotic invasive species is.
Well, let's start with invasive species, and that can be either an animal, insect, plant, some invertebrates, a number of things, but anything that falls in those categories that is out of its area and tends to take over an area and spread into that area basically undeterred. An exotic invasive species uh, are those things that were introduced from some other region and particularly from another continent in most cases, and they tend to spread rapidly and unchecked because they don't have the natural predators or control mechanisms that they would have in their native habitat. In other words, those other things that compete with it or slow it down. If we think about it, a couple of them that are examples everybody's familiar with is the Asian carp in the Illinois River, the emerald ash borer, which is spread from kind of the Chicago and the Lake Michigan area outward in multiple states here, and kudzu, which is the scourge of the South. I mean, they talk about all the forest and all the areas down in the southern United States being taken over by that plant that was brought in. Really, what they do is they come in and destroy or displace our native species, which is kind of what we've already alluded to. But how they do that is they're disruptive or do basically irreparable damage to that ecosystem. They change the balance of everything, which is why we should be concerned about it. If we look at insects like emerald ash borer, gypsy moth, they come in and kill the trees. Well, that's a problem, but the bigger problem is that removes a food source and a shelter for birds, insects, other animals that utilize that tree or whatever trees, that in the case of gypsy moth, any trees. Uh, and then if we look at some of our plants and plant impacts, which is one of the areas I've been working in more lately, is it's kind of that connection with plants and animals. Having the wrong plants can come in and really mess up the survival of local plants, native plants, and also changes the habits and or survivability of some of our animals. We think about out in the woods. You think about buckthorn, garlic mustard, bush honeysuckle, Japanese barberry are all items we see in that area. Bush honeysuckle is disruptive in that it basically displaces a lot of our native underbrush in forest areas, which they're used for both nesting and food for some of our birds. And look at bush honeysuckle, it grows a little bit lower. It's much more flexible than some of the native brush that would be out there, some of the other things that would be out there, and it opens up the nesting for being easier to access by the predators, thus fewer birds into the future. Japanese barberry is another one of those that initially it's a problem that it's so dense that a lot of our prey animals can't get access, and basically prey can get under it and get away from them, which seems like a good thing, although we get too many of them get away from it, and then we lose things like our red foxes, and then we get an upsurge of rabbits and other small vermin underneath it. Then as that gets bigger, then it gets to be a problem for even those small animals to get through it, so it becomes impregnable for anything.
I see.
So
what then can we do about it?
Well, some of the things that we can do is the biggest thing is get involved, be informed, and be vigilant about the things that we do. And what I'm thinking there is, landowners need to work to identify potentially emerging issues, whether it be an insect or a plant or an animal coming into an area. But particularly if we think about plants, on out in a forest or prairie area, being aggressive about trying to control those, and trying to really support the native plants that would be out there. Um, working with neighbors to do a coordinated effort so that your impact is a little bit better, and you expand that impact. As we know, if you control something on your place and everybody around you lets it go, well, it's going to keep reintroducing into your property.
Right.
Um, One of the things is things like the ash tree. Remove them, utilize them as soon as you discover that they've been infected, if you can, or even in before of that, if they're of a salvageable or log a condition where they could be logged out and actually utilized that way, and avoid moving. By doing that, we can slow down the infestation. We take away the food source for that insect, therefore controlling it in a way. Realize this kind of got away from us, but still, as we get out into more of the rural areas, we've really got a chance to do some things to slow it down. Avoid being the carrier, the human movement for those insects and plant material as well. Um, Basically, be aware and don't move things that could be, whether it be a tree, parts of a tree that could be infected by either gypsy moth or emerald ash borer, some of the other beetles that are coming in, before you move that into another location. And also think about plant material. We see a lot about some of the smaller plants, basically seeds being brought in on hiking boots and that kind of stuff. So being kind of vigilant from that standpoint. If you're out in the woods, make sure you're not moving something from one area, one hiking area to another hiking area. As far as landowners and landscapers, being aware of and thinking about those things uh, that are in your landscape. Look at doing more natives, or at least those plants that are proven to be non-invasive plants. We look at a lot of these plants we're talking about. The Japanese barberry, for example, is something you can still buy at a lot of locations where you can buy a landscape plant. They're considered an ornamental landscape plant. But looking at moving those out and being aware of those things that are getting out of our landscape and into rural areas, especially if you live on the peripheral of an urban area where it has that chance to get out and spread in a natural area or into pastures or prairie timber areas. Try to do your part to kind of control that and take those out. So we look at some of the things that we got into the bush honeysuckle, Japanese barberry, some of our ground covers. Um, there's a couple of one of the pear trees that's moving its way onto the invasive list because it tends to reseed and be very aggressive out in timber around forest edges. Work to move those out of your landscape as you identify those and replace them with something that's uh, is better for the environment. But and you still get the color. It doesn't mean we can't have the color and something that looks nice, that kind of stuff. Just maybe things that are have a little bit better uh,
Behavior.
behavior. Yes, and
Yeah.
may have actually bring the benefit of having a food source for those birds and other things that you like to have around the house.
Very good. So, where can we go to get more information? Is there information on the web that you would recommend?
Well, there are several places too. One is if you do a basic search of Illinois invasive species, you come up with several lists. The U.S. Forest Service has a nice list of them that is the U.S. list, and that one is uh, www.fs.fed.us/invasive species, and that's a good comprehensive list. Um, and then the Illinois IDNR has Illinois Department of Natural Resources also has a nice list and a group of educational materials, resource materials, has the new weeds that are being identified, and is maybe a good stepping off place for several of these things. The last one, and kind of one that many of us work off of, and some of the nicer printed material out there, is the Illinois Natural History Survey. Within their shop, their shopping online piece has a real nice set of posters and some other things of that nature where somebody can look at it. And big thing there is it helps you identify what some of those species are. There's a number of other places where some of it is stored, but that's kind of a good start, maybe.
Good, good. Well, for another edition of Spotlight on Natural Resources, this has been Bill Waisner and Jay Solomon.